All righty, everybody. Welcome to this
Hey,
episode of Them Smith Boys. How's everybody doing out there today?
well, I'm doing good.
You
I'm
doing
doing
good?
good. The
Okay,
weather's
okay,
nice and warm.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
What we
I'm
got on
doing
what we got
good.
on
Just
tap today?
say it again,
I said what we got on tap today.
man. Well, we about to bring the fire a little bit.
Okay.
Um, we we're gonna talk a little bit about the current events, but the main thing is we're gonna dig into this affirmative action situation.
Okay. Okay.
So
Well,
I want just go ahead and get the current events and get that stuff out the way so we can get on to it, and we're glad to have um, Miss Yolanda back. She can allow her to reintroduce herself, if I may go by Hubba.
Hey everyone, my name is Yolanda Taylor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an attorney and I'm the lead attorney at the Center for Community Law and Equity. It's a pleasure to be back with them Smith boys and I look forward to this discussion tonight.
yeah. Welcome back. Welcome back. So look, man. You know what we got to do, man. We got to talk about what's going on in the world, man. So I know one of the things right now, man, that's going on, man, is man, them high gas prices. No, I'm joking. No.
Man,
What's up with them high gas prices,
hey,
man?
man, it's it's real out here in these. Hold up, I think I'm paused for a second. It's real out here in those premium gas streets. Chan's car take premium gas. And I was just pumping. That thing was at 80. I said, oh, no, no, no.
Yeah, I guess one
It's
of the
tough,
biggest
but hey, it
things,
is what it is.
yeah, it is what it is. You know what's going on with Ukraine, Russia decided they want to invade Ukraine, and now the whole world is pretty much cutting off Russia. Junior, man, what was Putin thinking, man?
Uh, he, he wasn't thinking. Well, no, he's thinking. No, don't. He's look. All those. If you look up there where Ukraine is, you got Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, all of those former USSR bloc, Eastern Bloc countries.
Yeah,
I think Putin has illusions of grandeur. He wants to bring all those countries back for a Russian Empire, I assume. And the thing is, Putin is acting in his interest. And one thing I learned, I was an international studies major, and one thing I learned is that countries act in their interest, right? Oh, I think I froze again. Am
nah,
I
you good?
good? Am I good? Countries act in their interest, right? And sometimes countries do good things, and sometimes countries do bad things, but they do it in their interest. And so let's not say Russia is an evil country. Let's say Russia is acting in its interest. Just like when the United States invaded Iraq with
Oh
with
boy,
lack
there
of
you go,
evidence.
there you go.
I'm just saying, it, you countries were like, "Hey, no, we don't need to do that," but United States was acting in its interest. So let's not get into the good and evil country just to get into countries doing things in their interest,
Okay,
bad things in their interest of that.
okay.
Yeah.
Because murdering innocent civilians, regardless of who does it, we can assume that that's not necessarily a good thing, right?
Oh no, it's not good.
Okay.
United States messed up in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
paying out families who bombs. Same thing happened in Iraq, so it happens.
Okay.
Not mitigating it, but I'm saying that yeah, it's bad all the way across. It's bad when we do it, when the United States do it, and it's bad when Russia do it.
Okay.
But Russia gonna have some serious consequences.
Did you all get a chance to check out the State of the Union address by President Biden? What y'all think?
I mean, he did better than what I thought he would do. Let's say that.
Okay.
I was a little
Yeah.
nervous. I didn't know how he was going to pull it off, but he did better than I thought he did. And apparently, there were some standing ovations by, the Republican parties.
Mm-hmm.
So um, there were some things that, he, I guess, created as part of his unity agenda that they apparently appeared that night that they could
Yeah.
get behind. But
Yeah.
like after the State of the Union, the spin wheel begins, and then the Republicans' response
Yeah.
was, that little bit of hope I thought for a unity agenda. Just hearing their response is kind of like
Yeah.
made my
No,
hope diminish a bit, I should say.
What do you think,
no,
Junior?
I think they operate off. Unfortunately, the leadership of the Republican Party. I can't say all Republicans, 'cause I know all of them don't think that way. But the leadership of the Republican Party has determined that the division angle is what's going to work,
Yeah.
and that's what they're going to stick with. I'm surprised that all of a sudden Republicans, the leadership, has become anti-Russian or anti-Putin. I think they changed their tune in the last couple of weeks. Because the last time I checked, they were kind of cheering Putin on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I mean that was Trump's boy, like
yeah.
not too long ago.
He was a genius, right? That's
Yeah.
what Trump called him, a genius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
genius. Yeah, yeah. So now Trump's at CPAC trying to, backtrack,
Yeah.
and that's what happens when you have and I don't want to be condescending or insulting, but when you deal with your base and you play on they're not thinking through, they're not doing the critical thinking, then they'll buy the fact that last week you were for him and they were for him,
Yeah.
and now you're against him without any kind of rhyme or reason. So
Yeah.
hey, it is what it is.
This
Yeah.
is all
It's
about what we talked about the last time we were together. This rewriting of history, right? I mean, they are brilliant at rewriting what we recall history to
Oh,
be,
mhm.
right?
look, girl, let me tell you something. I have to. You gotta give credit where credit due. Uh, Republicans are brilliant at messaging,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I mean, they'll have you convinced that the day is Wednesday, and provide a rationale for it. And they'll say it so many times. I'll be like, "Dang, is the day Wednesday?" Let me look at
Hmm.
your camera.
Yeah.
See, I
Hmm.
got look. I'll look at my calendar to verify, but they know their base is not,
Correct.
so they're gonna
Correct.
go with it.
At least the ones that watch Fox
So,
News. We'll say that.
man, look,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in trouble tonight, man. I'm just going
Hey,
to tell you.
hey. Okay, look, I before we go on to what our main topic is, this is something that I have to talk about. I had when I was active duty Air Force, I had the distinct pleasure of living in the state of Texas for about 6 years, down in San Antonio, Texas. Now, I would tell you that I love living in Texas. Okay, but what they always say, they always do it big in Texas.
They do
So,
it big in Texas.
I'm not sure if you all are aware, but Governor Abbott signed a law, basically saying that if there is a child that has had transgender uh, uh, surgeries or any type of conversion, that the parents can be investigated for child abuse and they can be held accountable for abusing their child. And I just said to myself, this is one of the weirdest things that I've ever heard in my life. Like, it's like, what reality do we live in, where this is the case? I'm surprised you didn't hear about that.
Yeah, but man, listen, man, it's hard to keep up with. It so much going on,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
Uh, but like I say, when you have that agenda, the transgender, the anti-gay, the anti-immigrant, the anti anything that's not WASP per se,
yeah,
I guess is up for is the enemy.
yeah,
And what happens is when you have people in authority or in power, their policy is going to reflect that reality.
yeah,
So I'm not surprised when they do things like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. It's like out of a page out of their playbook. I mean, like you said, the messaging is so much better than the Democratic Party or any other
yeah,
party, and their playbook. I mean, this is strategy that they are specifically executing
hmm
across all areas, right? And I guess that's one of the areas is what we're going to talk about tonight. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean. Like you say, have to give credit where credit is due. I'm not surprised.
Yep.
Um, they use their small window of opportunity. They get as much bang for their buck
Mm-hmm.
doing their small window
Yeah.
of political opportunity. So
Yep. So one of the things that we're gonna get back into our topic. So there are a couple things we're gonna talk about. Harvard. We're gonna talk about UNC. Some of the lawsuits that's going on at the Supreme Court decided that they were going to take up. But I called my brother this morning. We always kind of talk the day before the one of the show just to kind of make sure we're on the same page. And so as we were talking about affirmative action, and then my brother said, "Hey man, you remember that? Look, people in North Carolina. I don't know if y'all remember this senator by the name of Jesse Helms." Jesse Helms and Harvey Gantt. That was probably one of the. Now I was in high school during the time, but there was this one ad that my brother referenced. He said, "Man, do you remember that ad?" And I was like, "I absolutely do." So before we get started, just bear with me. I'm gonna play this. I'm gonna play this ad because this is one of the. When you talk about identity politics, this ad right here really goes to the heart of identity politics. It goes to the heart of the inaccuracies that's reported concerning affirmative action, and we the same messaging when you talk about messaging, Yolanda, and the same messaging that they used back then, because this is a pretty old ad. They're using the same messaging right now. So let me go ahead and play this.
Let me say something, man.
Go ahead.
They put this ad out a week before the election. I was a freshman in college,
Yeah.
and we were working on Harvard Gantt campaign and everything. This came out a week before Gantt was actually leading in the polls.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
He was leading in the polls.
Yeah.
And that last week, and it looked like it was on for Gantt.
Yes.
And then this happened.
Yeah. So hold on for 1 second.
Whew.
You needed that job, and you were the best qualified. But they had to give it to a minority because of a racial quota. Is that really fair? Harvey Gantt says it is. Gantt supports Ted Kennedy's racial quota law that makes the color of your skin more important than your qualifications. You'll vote on this issue next Tuesday. For racial quotas, Harvey Gantt. Against racial quotas, Jesse Helms.
Oh boy. All right. We're back.
see, yeah, I had to refresh my recollection. I mean, we might be around the same age range, but I do remember Jesse Helms, and I do remember that race. But that video just refreshed my recollection very well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Boy.
So
What does that say though? Like that, to stir the fears of, voters or his base is what won the election. And you're right, we're still seeing that fear
so
stirring.
so here's what Jesse Helms understands. Here's what Trump understands. Here's what the Republican parties understand. Right? There's always a default within our population that if you trigger certain things, you're going to get a reaction,
Yeah.
right? And there's always been this thing that, listen, um, what's the saying? I always say it. When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression,
Yeah.
right? So anything that equalizes or gives outsiders, minorities, African Americans, whatever, at the levels of playing field, there's going to be some type of resentment
Yeah.
every time. And it's a deep resentment.
Yeah.
And the image of a look, he had his ring on, so he was a family man, and you're speaking to people that need jobs, and you're saying you didn't get this job because of a quota. Maybe you didn't get it because you weren't as qualified.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
And
So yeah.
I was saying, in addition to that, maybe that's just a lie. I mean, because I used to do criminal expunction work, and so there was a lot of data around how a white man with a criminal record stand way more of a chance of getting a job than a black man with no criminal record at all.
Yeah.
So just looking at that data, so maybe it's just a outright lie meant to stir the fears, as we know that's what Trump has done, stir the fears of people who may be well-meaning, but underneath those implicit biases,
Yeah.
that fear,
Yeah.
that survivor of the fittest mentality, like,
Yeah.
kicks
It,
in.
well, look. The thing is, and when we talk about affirmative action and we talk about the opposition to it, I think the biggest issue with affirmative action is people's ignorance of it, right? And so since people are ignorant of it, they buy into all these crazy things that people say.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we can dispel some of that tonight. Because one thing about affirmative action, and Ant will get into it, is that you know affirmative action was a cure, right, or somewhat of a cure of an issue, right?
Yeah. What was the
Everybody
issue? But
always
what was
likes
the
to
issue though? So when you talk about the issue? What was the issue? Let's start there.
exactly, because that's where I'm going, because that is where I'm going. You know where I'm going. So everybody wants to critique the cure, but everybody get crickets on the disease, right? So what was happening? Yeah. So I love to ask questions, right? Right? I love to ask questions. So the question is, what was happening at the time when affirmative action was initially put in place? What dynamics were in place, right? Why did John Kennedy find it necessary in 1961 to establish an executive order giving African Americans equal access? When you have a whole 14th Amendment that's been in existence since
Mm-hmm.
1868, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's about right. You got a
Mm-hmm.
whole 14th Amendment that was in place, equal protection of law, that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on where that was even necessary, right? So now you got to talk about the legacy of Jim Crow. You got to talk about the legacy of not giving African American access to these things. And so now in 1961, this is before the Civil Rights Act, mind
Yep.
you, right? John Kennedy tried to put this in place. So let's talk about the issue that it was trying to address. Because guess what, Mrs. Taylor, my brother, Mr. Smith, this is my favorite question ever. If the federal government had not stepped in with voting rights, civil rights, housing right, whatever, if the federal government had not stepped in, at what point would the southern states or legislators say, hey, we're going to do right?
Yeah.
You know?
Well.
That's a tough question. Or they're not even really doing right now, 100%. So that
that
intervention is
part,
necessary. Mm-hmm.
it, that part, right? Because here's the deal. Uh, People think I'm crazy when I say that voting rights, civil rights,
Ooh,
those things are still in its implementation phase, right?
hey, shout out to my man Mike Caraway, man. I hope you're doing all right, man. I hope you're living that good. You're
Okay,
living the retirement life, man. Go ahead.
okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's still an implementation phase. Because guess what? Uh, After Reconstruction, Jim Crow, all that stuff was in place for 100 years,
Yeah.
right? 1968, that's like 50 some years ago.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
we're only 50 years into a dynamic that was in place 100 years. So it's still implementation. In time these things were put enacted, opposition started right away. These people never stopped fighting. And what we're seeing now is the long game that we're playing
Yeah.
to try to take these things away.
Yeah.
But man, I don't want to steal too much of the thunder. I'm
No.
gonna just digress a little bit.
Look at your T-shirt. Does that say HBCU? Is that
it says a
I'm
whole
trying to read.
HBCU.
Yeah. Bam. Why do you think we needed HBCUs?
Yeah.
They were established because, these traditional private white institutions that, are being attacked now for affirmative action policies. They were, not opening their doors and not providing this educational opportunity. So we built our own schools, and our own schools, educated us. So, yeah. So like you said, what were we trying to cure? What we're still trying to cure
Well,
today.
well, I tell you,
It,
last
it gets
week, the last episode that we were on, we were talking about President Biden's historic selection of Judge Jackson for to the Supreme Court, and the first thing that we heard was she would be the first affirmative action hire, and and so and that's when me and my brother was talking. I was like, man, we really have to talk about affirmative action and what that really means, and so it just so happens that last night, look, I'll say every once in a while I watch Fox News. Every once in a while I watch Fox News just to see what's going on, and it doesn't matter how much I watch it; it's always a race to the bottom. But I think last night, well, we'll just go there.
So it might be time for Joe Biden to let us know what Ketanji Brown Jackson's LSAT score was. What hell did she do in the LSATs? Why wouldn't he tell us that? That would settle the question conclusively as to whether she's a once-in-a-generation legal talent, the next learned hand. It would seem like Americans in a democracy have a right to know that and much more before giving her a lifetime appointment, but we didn't hear that. And that was just one of many things that Joe Biden...
Tucker Carlson has the unmitigated audacity to question this black woman's criteria, and assuming she's unqualified for the job. Did we do that with Amy? I'm not even gonna call her by her last name. Did we do this, with other white Supreme Court justices? Did we ask for the LSAT score? The woman graduated from Harvard Law School.
Has anybody ever asked you for your LSAT scores in a job application or a job interview?
No. So he's going in assuming she's not qualified for the position, because they know to just say we don't want her because she's a black woman will just be blatant racism. But still, what he did is blatant racism too. They go all the way up to it and stop. The Klan, of course, goes all the way up to it, but they might as well be the Klan. They go all the way up to it, and stop. And that's just, that's why we still need affirmative action, because prejudices, like blatant prejudices and racism like his, implicit bias, all these things have been cooked and baked into a system that's created structural systemic racism based, like you said, on these historical things that have happened in this country. And now, there's this whole talk about reverse racism, like we're being discriminated against now. How? When even at privately white institutions, you're still the majority.
Yeah.
Well, look. One thing. First of all, it hasn't escaped me that they chose a very unflattering picture to while they were doing that. We get those historical tropes, Ms. Taylor. We get the dog whistle even in that. And I'm telling you, people that ingest Fox News and ingest that constantly and that vitriol, then I don't have too much time for you. I mean, that's like your willful ignorance. So whatever that hatred or whatever's in you that Fox feeds that keeps you going, that keeps them rated, more power to you. On with that. But one thing about HBCUs, Miss Taylor, I will tell you, white students get to go there. They go there for free, right?
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? When we saw white students on HBCU campuses at Show whatever, we didn't question whether they belonged there or not. we didn't think we were losing a spot, or we didn't think somebody qualified lost a spot
Yeah.
because of that dynamic, right? So a lot of people don't know that also that white students go to HBCUs and then go there on quote unquote minority scholarships. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that let's not forget that. Let's not forget that.
Have there been any lawsuits at HBCUs? No, let me stop.
No, 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 we, because here's the thing, because you know why? Because when I walked around Shaw University, walk around Central A&T, there's no doubt, what the school is. Just like at Chapel Hill, my daughter, Miss Taylor, Attorney Taylor, is at Chapel Hill, right? So let's get this. I've looked up the racial makeup of UNC Chapel Hill right now. Um, it is 60% white, 60% white,
Mm-hmm.
10% Asian, 7.7% African American, and 7.7% Hispanic, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the makeup. And I think Chapel Hill is one of the schools whose policies are being looked at right now.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
my thing is, looking at those numbers, what is the issue? Right?
Yeah, what's the
Is
issue? I
seven
mean,
African Americans? Yeah,
some sore
yeah.
loser applicant. I hate to say it. Y'all got me at the wrong time of the night. Because I'm saying sore
Go ahead,
loser
go ahead.
applicant, who probably didn't get in. Now you're crying and you're trying to find a reason why you did not get in, and you're trying to say it's because that black unqualified person or that Asian or that Latino Hispanic unqualified person took my seat. So this is the delusion,
No,
the delusion reality
no,
we're living in.
yeah, maybe maybe you lost your seat to the daughter of the guy that donated $20 million for the building over there on campus. Maybe you lost your seat with,
Yeah.
Yep.
because normally uh, the African Americans that are admitted to that school or any school, whatever, um, they are the top of the top. You know what I'm saying? They're the cream of the crop, right? Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
top 10%. The only affirmative action that I see on campus is maybe athletics
Well,
and
Yep.
maybe
yeah.
yes,
Legacy.
maybe legacies, yes. And I told Anthony last time we discussed that, I said, listen, if you're going to get rid of preferences, get rid of all of them, right? Because on that application, like Anthony's daughter, that was your father in the armed services, right? Uh, that's you get preference for that. Do you live in a rural area? Because people from rural areas are underrepresented, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is your father or mother an alumni of the school, right? So there are all types of factors that go into that. But one thing about it is that you still have to have the scores, the test scores to get into it. Now, unless your dad donated $1 million or you want to play the
Yeah.
football, lacrosse, or golf team, not just football and basketball, right? That's
Yes,
one
Right.
thing.
exactly.
Because
Right.
we don't forget those wealthy people that backdoor their kids into these schools by letting them play
Mm-hmm.
on the quote unquote lacrosse and rowing team. Remember that scandal, right? So maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
who you're losing your seat to, because
Well,
9 times out of 10, that minority applicant is way more qualified.
well, this is the thing. You spoke about University of North Carolina. Harvard University is also a part of that lawsuit. Um, and so
Yes.
yeah, and so one of the interesting things I found this study. I'm gonna post this study in the chat after this show is over. But so something happened with Harvard because they were a part of the lawsuit. Um, they were able to the folks who did the study. It was published in 2019. They were able to get access to the behind the scenes on how admissions really works. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so and they're looking at a snapshot in time. So the paper was published in 2019. I think the time period they looked at, I think it was between 2015 and 2018. but it still remains the same. Okay, I knew that there was something about legacy admissions with Harvard. Okay, I always knew that, but as I started to read that study, I didn't also know they call it ALDCs. That's the abbreviation,
Mm-hmm.
but what it means is recruited athletes, legacies, and so everybody knows what the dean of a school is. So the
Yeah.
dean has a list of students that he's interested in. That's what it's called, the dean's interest list. And then
Mm-hmm.
also children of faculty and staff. So
Mm-hmm.
all those four categories, they make up ALDCs. And before I go there, before I move it further, I want to talk about this. There's a word called meritocracy that always seems to come up, and it's synonymous with affirmative action. The idea that you make it on your own merit. That's what the idea is. Okay. This study showed that among white applicants that were admitted, 43% were admitted either because of they were an athlete, they were a legacy, they were the dean, they were on the dean's interest list, and they were children of faculty and staff. Okay.
And say that again. Say that again.
Yeah. Say for the
And
people in the.
say it real slow, like you're talking to a kindergartner
Yeah. Let me say
or Fox
this
News
again.
people.
The study showed, based on all the testimony, all the documents that was presented, that among white admits, over 43% of white admits that were admitted to Harvard, they were admitted because either they were a recruited athlete, a legacy student, meaning their parents went to one of their parents went to Harvard, they were on the dean's interest list, or they were the child of faculty and staff.
Mhm.
Mm.
And like,
And,
where's the
and
merit in any of that? What's the hard work in any of that? I mean, you're, and this is stuff that we know, right? We know that a lot of these folks, are getting in because of these things: nepotism, who who your daddy know, who your mama know, your granddaddy's wealth, like you said, James. The donations. We already know that this is why you're getting in, but then to then turn around and oh, let me back up. This whole thing, what I found interested in reading that study is that all of this is coming from this one man.
Yeah.
We said there's an architect, there's a puppet master that's creating a blueprint. What's his name? Edward Bloom, who also attacked the Voting Rights Act. Now he's going after affirmative action. And then just hearing how they had to recruit Asian American students to go against African American students. He claims he has a huge number of African American, Asian American students who are saying that they were discriminated against based on race, because African Americans possibly took their seat. I mean, I just find that this is Jim Crow point two. We see it as it relates to voting. We see what's happening with voting. They gutted the pre-clearance requirement under the Voting Rights Act, which basically makes the Voting Rights Act, without teeth. Um, States like North Carolina, who have a history of voter suppression and intimidation, that's not even just a history. They have a present method of voter intimidation and suppression. They don't have to go through pre-clearance anymore. And as soon as the Supreme Court held that, North Carolina tried to pass a voter ID law. So the same conservative judges or justices that are on the U.S. Supreme Court, unfortunately, are going to be the ones to hear these two affirmative action cases, the one against UNC and the one against Harvard. And I mean, all I got to say is, folks, it's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to vote. It's time for us to elect people who are concerned about these issues that we're talking about. It's time, like Martin Luther King said, it's time to go to Washington. It's time to take their power, and it's time to really engage and stop thinking that your vote doesn't matter, because look who's been elected, and all this stuff has trickled down effects. Every decision that the U.S. Supreme Court makes, it's going to have trickle down effects, and those justices are elected by the presidents who win office, right? They're appointed. So that's why I'm so excited about Ms. Brown Jackson's appointment. We got to get ready for this confirmation hearing because we already know, there's a tax about her qualification just based simply on the color of her skin.
Look, man.
Well,
Look, Franklin Roosevelt nominated Supreme Court justice who dropped out of high school. So, uh, so a lot of the Supreme Court justices didn't even have any legal experience whatsoever. But like I say, in spaces that are quote unquote supposed to be reserved for white males, what have you, then of course all of a sudden now qualifications matter, right? But you don't hold nobody before to that same standard. But look, the thing about Harvard, or even I think at Harvard, I think the percent of African Americans on that campus is 5.5%, around that, less than 6%, I think,
roughly. Yeah.
around that, right? But 43% of the applicants that get in are not based on merit. But that 6% there, so what that's telling me is that you're concerned with any African American, because basically here's affirmative action. You talking about a cutoff, apparently there's a whole lot more qualified African Americans than would get there, but you're not gonna get no more than 6%, because the other ones are reserved for the ones who don't,
Well,
who qualifications
the
don't matter.
the whole idea of a cutoff, that's a
Yeah,
misnomer in and of
yeah,
itself, because the
exactly,
reality is
exactly.
that
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
with when you
Yeah.
and I wish I could publish this study now, but when you look at so let me give you an example. Okay, they said that based on what they saw, they said that a white applicant with an initial probability of being admitted, if it was 5%, their admissions probability would increase to 31% if they were a legacy student. Now let's think about this for a second. What kind of student are you if there is a 5% chance that you would get into arguably one of the most prestigious schools in the country, maybe even the world? What kind of student do you have to be if your probability is 5%? Okay. I mean, you just let that
Stellar.
sink in.
I mean, a stellar student. I mean, and they. I mean, for
No.
folks who
Let
are
me. Did you hear what I said?
clarify that.
Huh.
What kind of student
What's
do you
that?
have to be?
If you had a 5% chance to get into Harvard,
Oh no. Okay, got you.
yeah, you ain't stellar.
Okay, you're not stellar. You're right. You're definitely not stellar. I'm sorry. I think I reversed that in my mind,
Yeah,
thinking that it was hard to get into
Correct.
into
We
Harvard.
that
Because
we
all know it's
we
hard.
looked at all the aspects that they look at, and they said that your chance of getting in based on everybody else that was admitted is 5%. But if you were a legacy, if your parent went to that school, it goes up to 31%. And you know what's
See?
even you know what's even what gets me even better? If you were on the dean's interest list, it went up to 59%.
Wow.
Wow.
So so this whole idea of meritocracy, when you look at someone that, and it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. I mean, just not by Harvard standards. But
Mm-hmm.
when you have a 5% chance to do something, and then just because you were lucky enough to have a parent, meaning you didn't do anything on your own, you were just lucky enough to have a parent that attended Harvard, that now your probability to get admitted is 31%.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you should be more concerned, not be concerned about the race of the person that's qualified getting in. You should be concerned about the person that is not qualified getting in for things that have nothing to do with academics, right?
Nothing
Because
direct.
the that's right, because the big thing is like, just like that man that balled up that paper, he's saying that uh, they believe that people are unqualified taking jobs from hard
Mm-hmm.
working white people, and that's not the case. And here's another thing I want to let you know. A lot of times when African Americans normally get in those positions, they are usually overqualified for the position anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then
You're
and then let me go ahead and blow this thing up right quick. Blow it up. And we ready?
Let's get ready to rumble!
Of course, John Kennedy, executive order, affirmative action. Then Lyndon Baines Johnson came with the the Civil Rights Act in 1964, which had the EEOC, right? But in, I think, 1967, I want to say, Lyndon Johnson made another addition. You know what the addition was? He amended affirmative action to include women, right? Which I have no problem with that, right? Per se. But here's the issue. Here's what people don't know. The number one beneficiary of affirmative action is not even African Americans. Now that's the crazy part. The number one beneficiary of affirmative action has been white women.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to talk about that and put that out there. But for the most part, that's who, when that dynamic changed and was more inclusive to everybody, that became the dynamic. Now we can fall back.
Well, this is the thing, and you know, so I often think about, you know, who may be out here listening to us.
Yeah.
And you know, I will say to my my white brothers and sisters, this isn't any shade on you. It's just that we're in the position where we can tell our own story, and I think that's very important, because I've seen too many conversations go sideways because people have an inaccurate understanding of what affirmative action is.
Yes.
And so it's no shade, and if you feel uncomfortable, we're just stating the facts. That's just what it is.
And I just hate that our Asian brothers and sisters are being used by, you know, this right wing conservative party when they couldn't prove that affirmative action actually hurt white students. You know, they decided to grab, you know, our Asian American brothers and sisters and use them. You know, when the fact of the matter is that even in these admission policies that ground affirmative action, race is not the only factor. You know, I mean,
Yes.
it's a factor, but it's not the only factor. I mean, they're looking at the whole student, right? They're looking at the whole student. And some of these universities, like in the Texas case, you know, where the U.S. Supreme Court, I think it was Fisher versus the University of Texas, where the U.S. Supreme Court, you know, found that, you know, they had a constitutional, you know, right to have this policy. You know, they had a compelling educational interest in ensuring student body diversity, you know, and so, I mean, they're looking at you for other reasons, not just because of your race. And to reverse that, how many white people got in because of their race, right? You know, not just because of their privilege, their wealth, who they knew, which is all tied to race. We talk about the race wealth gap in America and who's wealthy and who's not. You know, it aligns along race.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got in because of your race. There's still implicit biases, you know, just based on names, right? So your name on the application, you know, there may be an implicit bias there if they hear, you know, Yolanda versus, I don't know, Karen. I'm just saying Karen. So, you know, there are implicit biases on job. You know, I mean, there are studies, you know, and racial justice institutes that do like racial bias trainings have found that, you know, even if you go to Harvard, like let's say you do graduate from Harvard, and you're an African American person or a Black person, and then you go get a job, you know, there's still a likelihood that someone from a state college will still beat you out just because of implicit bias based on your name. So, I mean, again, it goes back to this is just illusionary. It's not real. It's Jim Crow .2, and they're attacking every system, you know, and we got to stay woke as it relates to these issues.
Well, I'm gonna throw another stat out there, right? If you get the opportunity, because like I say, if you get the opportunity to go to Harvard.edu, and I want you to just go to the athletics, and then I want you to pull up all the athletic teams and look at the racial makeup, okay? And when you do that, I want you to think about this stat right here. Now, I just said before that a person who had a 5% chance of getting in, if they fell into one of those categories, it jumped up. Well, guess what? If you were if you had a 1% chance of getting in, but you were a recruited athlete, you have a 96% chance of getting in. So it goes from 1%, and we're talking about a white recruited athlete had a 1% chance of getting in, but because they were an athlete, it went up to 96%.
Again, that's why
Well,
you never prove that
I
these
mean,
policies
who is
were
taking your
pertinent.
who is this imaginary person that you think is taking your spot? If you're one of those
Exactly.
people out there who's saying that I didn't get in because some minority took my spot,
look,
and,
Attorney Taylor, you mentioned the Texas case that went to Supreme Court. Abigail Fisher.
Hmm.
Uh, you remember the key thing about Abigail Fisher? People forget they pulled her SAT scores and her GPA. The majority of the minorities that got into Texas scored higher than her anyway.
Hmm.
So so maybe she didn't get in, and her SAT scores were mediocre at best. So maybe she didn't get in because she was not as good, and that it goes back to that perception. And I don't want to.
But that
I
goes
don't
back to
know.
racism
Racism.
because
Yeah, it's
she's
like
not good. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. She's not good. I mean, yeah. And
But she
and
still
and the
thinks
thing
she's better
is
than them.
yeah, exactly. And the thing about exactly, even the thing about Chapel Hill when I remember when my daughter went to entrance before she ever was deciding where she wanted to go, or her junior year, we just went for a visit, see if she wanted to apply. And they told her, hey, if you're just a student that went to school for 4 years and got a 4.0, you might not get into Carolina or 4.5, whatever. They're looking for the well-rounded, all these other factors that play into it, right? And so you may have this kid that maybe went through 4 years of high school, took all the orange classes and APE and did this, and didn't do anything else, right? Chapel Hill's not looking for you, right? So like you said before, there are so many factors that play into it, but it goes back to messaging and what people have been led to believe, and they basically have been led to believe that affirmative action or any type of thing that levels the playing field, and really it's not leveled. Look at these numbers. Um, that the standards have been lowered, when in reality those minority students that are getting in, their grades are probably higher or as high as anybody that even gets into the school. And the
Hmm.
only people that standards are literally lowered for are those athletes. And when you see athletes, I'm not just talking about football and basketball, which are the revenue things. I'm talking about the ones that football and basketball prop up,
correct.
rowing, lacrosse, tennis, all those other sports where kids who would not have gotten in, but the parents use that as an avenue to get these kids into these prestigious schools. So yeah,
And
let's
we
talk
know
about
that
this.
happens because of all the recent scandals we've seen with these celebrities, how they were able
Yeah,
to get their kids into these schools. I mean,
Yes.
just because of wealth. So it definitely
yeah.
happens. And
Well, the last stat that I'm going to read, which I thought is the net of it, is that based on all the analysis that they did, they said that only 25% of white ADLC admits would have been admitted. Meaning that if they did not have that status, only 25% would have been admitted based on their academics.
yeah,
I,
you know what?
I was just blown away when I saw that. I was just blown away,
Yeah.
That's why they
And,
can't.
and,
They
and th-
cannot.
blown
Go
away.
ahead.
yeah. But and this is probably the same thing. That little study, if you did that study at any other school, any PWI, whether it's a prestigious, quote unquote, prestigious school or not, you probably have that same dynamic in place. George Bush got into Yale because of Prescott, right?
Mhm.
Um, Donald Trump got somebody to take his SAT score when he transferred to Penn, right? I mean, take his SAT for
Jared
him.
Kushner's dad donated about $2 million to Harvard for him to be able to get in.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So where's your anger? And then let's remember this. Look at the percent of these kids on campus. They're not the overwhelming majority on campus. So what is, see, here's the thing, and you mentioned Attorney Taylor, you mentioned what happened when they gutted the Voting Rights Act, right? Section 5, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Section 5.
and the logic that Roberts used when he wrote that horrible decision, one of the worst decisions ever written because it made no sense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the logic he was using was that, well, look at all the Afro Americans that have voted. So the voting rights thing has worked. So there's no need for it. Yes, it worked because there is someone holding you accountable, right? Once you took the accountability away, Texas didn't even wait 24 hours,
Yeah.
right? So
North
now
Carolina did.
we see, no, exactly. So now, what you think going to happen, right? What do you really think is going to happen when they take this away? Because it's only the enrollment's already low at these schools anyway. So when they take affirmative action away, and they're going to do it, I mean, you look at the Supreme Court, I'll be hard pressed to believe they're not going to do it. What you think is going to happen at these schools with the
It,
admissions with
Well,
these qualified students?
it's gonna be
if
a
you look
Do
at
chilling
you think it's
effect.
go
going to go
ahead.
up or down?
If you look at the Harvard study and even the Harvard case, I didn't see. I'm trying to figure out a situation where you can say that race was a factor that was used. I'm talking about for the folks who are proponents of getting rid of affirmative action. I couldn't see us. I don't know. I didn't see where they say, you know what, it's because this person is this color or that they were admitted. So I think we may be surprised at what actually happens if affirmative action is ruled is is ruled unconstitutional.
I really hope, have that hope, that we will be surprised that these judges will be strict jurists, but we know that they were sent with an assignment, some of them, and they know their assignment. Um, but like when you talk about affirmative action and you talk about everything that we fought for in civil rights, first we were fighting for equality because we thought if we just had that sameness of opportunity, that then we will have economic opportunity, we will have the ability to vote, we will have all this stuff. But and so we have folks in this country, including like people like Tucker Carlson and the right wing that says, but they have the opportunity. The door has been open. But just because the door has been open and now you can actually submit an application, it does not mean that you still have equity, that there's still access, because of, again, systemic racism, which is built on individuals' implicit biases, who are the people looking at the resumes, looking at your name, unconsciously grading you stricter because of your name. Like I say, implicit biases are at work. But if they have a policy or scorecard, and they can give race, I don't know, maybe like at certain points, that does even the playing field. So what I'm trying to say is, like, these students, and I think in the Harvard case, what did they call themselves? Students for fair admissions. Okay, now they're saying they need fairness. Well, fairness is equity, access, and it's not equality. It's not just giving me the same opportunity to submit my resume. It is, now that my resume is in the door, what barriers are you going to remove, that have systemically and historically been there, that have prevented us, from being, and it's still there, because like you said, the percentage of African Americans on these campuses is still very small, as probably compared to the general population in some of these communities. It's still very small. And HBCUs are still flourishing, by choice. And also because, some students are still, locked out of an opportunity to have like, this equitable education in America.
Well, you
So
can't say
that's, so
that word
that's,
equity because if you say equity, then people gonna think it's critical race theory.
well, they can think what they want, because critical race
I'm
theory is
trying
the
to,
truth.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Critical race
Yeah,
theory, what they
look.
call
And
critical race theory.
we all have unconscious biases and all that. I mean, so it's a
Yeah, we all do.
we all have it. But I think it's one is being aware of it.
Yeah, being conscious of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all do.
look,
It's human.
look, look,
What?
look, man. It goes back to what I said before. These schools in the South, uh, that up until the '60s, were not admitting African Americans. If the federal government had not stepped in and said, "Hey, the 14th Amendment does apply to y'all too," y'all did come back into the Union, right? And at what point would they have start admitting African Americans?
Nothing. Not by the kindness of their hearts. No, they wouldn't have.
Yeah,
You
because
know.
look, I think I think what's it? We cover in my civics class, James Madison and Federalist 51. If
Mm-hmm.
if men were angels, we wouldn't need government or laws. Is that what he said?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that what he
Yeah.
said?
Oh, you're asking
So
me? Yeah, I
yeah,
believe.
I don't know.
I mean,
yeah,
and the bottom line is like we still need these safeguards. We still need the safeguards,
yes.
unfortunately, of a federal government that is still the leading, I guess jurisdiction or government as it comes to civil rights. We still need these important civil rights safeguards, and but there's this blueprint, this well constructed blueprint to attack, these fundamental civil rights, pieces of legislation based on the notion that we have equality now. Everybody has an
Well,
opportunity,
well,
and that's
the problem is, and I'm glad what George Floyd did. George Floyd kind of woke some people up because what happened is we had this kind of Pollyannish view of history. Um, there was slavery. Then after slavery, there was Jim Crow. Martha King had a dream. They passed the Civil Rights, Voting Rights Act, Housing Act, the Brown Board. Okay, racism is over. Okay,
yeah.
let's move on. We don't need these laws anymore. Uh, no, what? That's not what happened.
Well, they didn't teach
What
about
happened is that,
the systems. That's the thing. They talked about
huh?
it's platitudes. But when you talk
Yeah,
about when you look, man, there's this really good book called Color of Law, and you talk
Yeah.
about how
yeah.
redlining, and so they talked
Mm-hmm.
about the platitudes, but they didn't talk about the
What's his
systems that
name?
were in place.
Rosenthal. Yeah,
Yeah, Rosenstein.
It's about systems
Rosen.
that's in place. That's the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the
Yeah.
systems that are in
Look,
place that work invisibly
exactly.
to the eye, but they are in
Yeah.
place to deny opportunity still. I mean, like I was just reading an article today looking at the race wealth gap in America. And I mean, it was astonishing. I mean, like the gap, I believe, I'm trying to remember what that number was. I have it here. Like the gap between black and white households, and this was a study done by the Brookings Institute. It said the 400 richest American billionaires have more total wealth than all 10 million Black American households combined. You know, it stated that because of centuries of discrimination, and exploitation of Black Americans, we are much poorer than white Americans. Now, I'm not talking about individual white people who might be poor, and that's part of the whole issue too, because they're thinking, well, why are you saying I have privilege? I'm poor, I'm struggling just like you. We're not saying that you don't have setbacks. We're not saying that you don't have disappointments. We're not saying that you don't have struggles. But what we are saying is that the color of your skin was not one reason for that setback or disappointment. But so just to share this data real quick, it says that Black households held a share of the national wealth in proportion to their share of the U.S. population, it will amount to 12.68 trillion in household wealth. rather than the actual sum of 2.54 trillion. So that's a total racial wealth gap of 10.14 trillion dollars. So and all of that is, discrimination, lack of opportunity to go to schools, to, at least have some economic mobility. Then when you get out of school, you get the job market, you're facing that system. So that's why I do
Well,
think, this is all about, power, right? This is all
yeah,
about power. Who has the ability to define reality, not just for themselves, but for other people. And that's the fight in this country, is who has power. And that's why they're attacking
yeah,
the states.
and listen, and that's this thing about when they talk about African Americans and they talk about the wealth gap, and they say, well, because of some type of behavioral dynamic that makes African America more prone to be. Let's literally look at what happened now. Let's look at places like Tulsa and Wilmington, where you
Mm-hmm.
had black bankers, black business owners who were acquiring generational wealth, who were
Mm-hmm.
murdered and land was taken away. You know, their descendants do not have access to that wealth, right? Let's talk about the African American farmers who had those millions and millions of acres of land, and with government policies, systematically they lost their farms and their land. That's just those farmers where I'm at in Duplin County that get those millions and millions of dollars of subsidies from the federal government, right? You
Socialism.
know, say it again.
Socialism.
Socialism. Oh yeah, socialism. Yeah, oh yeah,
But not
socialism.
the kind of
Yeah,
socialism that we talk
exactly.
about. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's generational wealth that was taken away. Um, color of law. Talk about those Levitt towns, right? When
Mm-hmm.
African Americans, the listen, the white middle class was literally built on the GI Bill. That
Mm-hmm.
when these baby boomers came from college, paid them to go to college, gave them GI Bills and those VA home loans, it was government policy not to give African American loans,
Mm-hmm.
houses, wealth. So when we talk, and then let's go a little further. Let's talk about these zoning boards, eminent
Mm-hmm.
domains. When these
Mm-hmm.
zoning boards intentionally found prosperous African American communities, and when Eisenhower came through with the highway bill and they built the interstate system, all the interstate went through these prosperous black communities, land, wealth, businesses that were taken away. So let's examine some of the practices that were put in place that caused that gap. And it has nothing to do with the behavior. Because by all accounts, African Americans were doing the right things, doing it the right way, in spite of Jim Crow segregation, still prospering. But it was government policy that was put in place to limit that advance. So
Yeah.
I digress.
Well, I think it gets to a point where
I
when
agree.
you when you know when you have an understanding of the history, it gets frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think
I think I think James Baldwin said to be uh,
yeah.
conscious,
That's
to
just
be
in America.
politically or whatever conscious,
Yeah.
is to be in a conscious state of
Outrage.
frustration,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
rage, and
Yeah.
there you go, something like
All
that. Yeah,
You
times.
know. So
he
yeah,
ain't never
man, that's
lied.
the thing, man. When you know the history, man, not the whitewash history. When you see these conversations and you see some of the ignorant comments, and I don't mean ignorant as a I don't mean ignorance in a negative connotation. I'm talking about ignorance in the fact that you just don't know. When you see
Yeah,
those comments, but I'm just saying we you have access to so much information. The people that if you want to know, it's out there. I mean that's the reality.
Yeah, and that book that's behind you,
With
James, the 1619 Project.
oh, I got it behind me
oh
That's
too. I got it.
behind both of y'all actually.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's a good place
yeah.
to start, right? That's a
Hey,
good place to start.
Yolanda,
Man,
Yolanda, look at the other book. What's that? What's that? The Color of
Oh
Law.
yeah, The Color of the Law. Yep, all those books are good books to
Hey, Junior,
start. Um,
we
one
gonna
of
have to do
your
a show.
Yeah.
We
Say it
got to
again.
do a show about
Yes.
housing.
Oh, we do. We have to do another one about housing.
Man, man, look, I tell you what, I have a very good friend, and that's how I have a very good friend. He's a senior vice president of a bank, and he's over compliance.
Oh,
And man, oh yeah, yeah. But listen, boy, that appraisal bias,
okay.
and he said that in some of the practices that banks are still doing, man, I'm not even going to tell you what happened to me and James Todd by our house. That's a whole nother story.
Well, let's say that for the next episode.
Yeah.
Well, look, we before we do our closing thoughts, I always want to thank everybody who participated, everybody who tuned in. Um, we like I say, this was just a thought process, and me and my brother, we made it to fruition, and we are really thankful for the people who support our show, who take the time to watch, who take the time to comment. So we definitely want to say thank you. But with that, we'll move to our closing comments. Uh, ladies first.
Okay, thank you guys. I want to just say that, this whole, like, as in every attack we're seeing currently by this new group of right wing conservatives, is, it's based on a falsehood. It's based on a falsehood, and it's based on racism. It's still based on racism and this notion that something must be wrong with this particular group of people. They could not have gotten in to this university. They have to be like have a low scoring LSAT or a low scoring SAT score. All of that is just based on this belief that's grounded in racism, or this belief that's grounded that there's something different or wrong about this particular group. And a book that I'm reading, Abram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, says that, at all points in this fight, we have to be able to name it as what it is, describe it in detail, which is what we've done tonight, and then we got to work towards dismantling it. If we really want fair opportunity and fairness, which is what this country supposedly was built upon, we really want that for ourselves, for our future generation of children. These are things that we have to continue to have the courage to talk about and dismantle.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I'm
you going?
gonna defer. I'm gonna let you go last, Junior. But I wanna say this real quick. Another interesting thing that I found out is that Harvard doesn't give out scholarships. so, so, so imagine. Oh, you didn't know that? You didn't?
No.
Oh no, I have
Obviously, I didn't go to Harvard.
I know they must get found. They get found your aid though, right?
Well, financial aid is available, but I'm just saying, Harvard they do not give out athletic scholarships. So you have to have you have to have the money and the resources to be able to. But I'm just I was just intrigued by what I
when you
read.
when you have when you have like a 40-some billion-dollar endowment, you can do that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like I say,
so they don't give out formal scholarships.
Yeah.
They don't give out formal, but if you donate.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll one last thing I want to say, I want to put a shout out to my sister, my big sister Pam. If you say prayers at night when you go to sleep, my sister had surgery, and so she's still recovering. So Pam, we thinking about you. We love you. That's all I have.
All right. Well, listen. Affirmative action is it's. I'm at a place now where there are a lot of times where we just kind of grin and bear it, but I'm not at a place now where I'm going to let people be comfortable in their ignorance and let people be able to have these thoughts or say these things unchallenged. And when it comes to African Americans, when it comes to things like affirmative action, um, it's just the fact that the bottom line is that there is still a good portion of this country who has an issue with the advancement of African Americans. Whether they said some people are bold enough to say it, and some people harbor it quietly. And that's just it. So we have to, those forces never stop fighting, right? And it keeps manifesting themselves over time as it do in this country. And as me and my brother say, facts don't care about your feelings. You know, um, if we're saying these things about affirmative action and these things about people's feelings, and if it hurt your feelings, well then, I mean, imagine how it is to walk in this skin in this country every day, right? So I'm not feeling any type of way about calling these things out in a way that puts it out there where you have to just eat it. So, yeah, we just have to keep bringing it, like you said, Attorney Taylor. Keep fighting. Like I said, the forces that are against advancement of African Americans, other minorities, those forces never stop fighting, and so why should we? So yeah, so that's it.
All righty. Well, we'll see y'all until we'll see y'all until next time. Take care. Be safe out there.
All right.